It is interesting being a believer in Messiah. One of the things that ends up happening is when you end up accepting the Lord, when you end up repenting of your sins, when you ask the Lord to end up coming into your heart, into your life, sending you the Spirit of God, and when you seek to not walk according to your own best light, but instead seek to end up understanding what God is doing and seeking to serve his purposes, a great adventure starts. But one of the things that ends up happening with this great adventure is you find that what externally identified you in the past doesn't necessarily identify you as fully as it used to. And one of the things that sometimes people go to different spiritual fellowships and different congregations, you find people who are united in the Spirit of God, but you also find people who are not necessarily defined by the things that they were defined by before they became believers. And so to be part of the body of Messiah means that there's going to be people who, before you became a believer, you would have nothing to do with them. They weren't your clan. They weren't your tribe. They weren't your kind of people. But part of the training that God does with the body of Messiah is he starts to teach us how to recognize people not by external characteristics, but to recognize people instead by the Spirit. And so with this, you will learn, as the Spirit of God helps you, to love people who you wouldn't have necessarily been attracted to normally. The other thing that ends up happening is you end up being in a position where things happen. And I just really want to encourage people that even though it's not normal, even though it's not natural, even though it's not who you would have been, God has a work in his children where he is broadening us. There is a work that God is doing in his children where we recognize people by the Spirit. And when you recognize people by the Spirit, you might be somebody who lives in a city, but you are all of a sudden meeting very rural people who are not culturally like you, but who you recognize as carrying the same Spirit as you do. Likewise, there's very great concern at this point in time about race relations. But in the body of Messiah, when you meet somebody who is of a different ethnic background than yours, but they have the Spirit of God, God is teaching you how to love in a fashion which moves across barriers. And when God teaches you how to love people who are past barriers, there are people who may eat different kinds of food than you naturally eat, but they are part of the body of Messiah. There are people who have different ethnicities, very different skin tones, who have different types of things going on that God is going to teach you how to love. There may be people from different backgrounds or who remind you of people who have done real harm to you in the past. And the Spirit of God is going to say, it is time for you to learn to forgive. It is time for you not to hold against this new group of people what people have done in the past to you. And so this is kind of part of growing in the Spirit of God, because God is creating a body for himself. God is also calling people who are not currently believers to love him, and you may be part of his plan and his purpose of drawing people to himself. Likewise, what you have going on is you don't get to live your life anymore based on what you think is a good idea, but the Lord is teaching you how to end up flowing with, how to care for, how to recognize, and how to interact with those who are part of the body of Messiah. So amazing things are ahead, and unlikely people are going to join together. And you may have a vision, you may have something that you want to accomplish, but what if God is going to help you accomplish what you desire to see happen, but he's going to give you unlikely allies? Just don't want you to miss something that God has, because it isn't something that would end up happening apart from God doing amazing things. Something to think about. Shalom.